Russell Webb arrived 40 minutes early to the Christmas party on account of the ice. His '98 F-150 had struggled up the hill to the insurance office, and he figured better early than not at all. The hallway smelled like pine garland and stale coffee. Through the heavy oak door of the conference room, he heard voices, laughter, the kind that comes easy when folks think they're alone. Then he heard Carol's voice, his wife of 15 years, talking in a tone he hadn't heard in months. Bright, young-sounding. 3 months along, she said. Due in June? More laughter, women congratulating. Derek and I couldn't be happier. Russell's hand had been reaching for the door handle. Now it just hung there in the air, briefcase getting heavy in his other hand. The metal felt cold against his palm. He did the math quick. 3 months back put them at September. They hadn't been intimate since last February. He let his hand drop, turned around, walked back down that hallway and into the blinding snow, leaving the party behind. But that was just the beginning. The drive home took 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. Russell's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white. The wipers scraped ice off the windshield in a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. Fast, then faster. The defroster blew hot air that smelled like dust and old pennies. 3 months pregnant, due in June. He tried to remember the last time they'd been together. Really together. It had been late January. A Sunday morning, snow coming down outside, both of them still half asleep. That was 10 months ago now. Maybe 11. Carol had her hysterectomy 3 years back. Emergency surgery after the complications. He remembered sitting in that waiting room, drinking coffee that tasted like motor oil. The doctor coming out to tell him she'd be fine, but there wouldn't be any more children. They'd nodded at each other, gone home, never talked about it again. Hadn't seemed to matter. They were past that age anyway. But now she was pregnant. The truck slid a little on a patch of black ice. Russell corrected without thinking. Muscle memory from 40 years of Wisconsin winters. His mind was doing different math now. September conception. That would have been the weekend he was up in Door County at the surveying conference. 3 days gone. Carol had said she'd visit her sister. He pulled into the garage and sat there with the engine running. The familiar smell of motor oil and sawdust should have been comforting. It wasn't. He stared at his workbench, his father's old tools organized by size, the way the old man had taught him. Everything in its place. Everything measured and true. Nothing felt true anymore. Russell cut the engine. The silence rushed in. He got out, stood there looking at the door that led into the kitchen. Carol wouldn't be home for a couple hours yet. The party would go until 8, maybe 9. He could go inside, pack a bag, be gone before she ever knew he'd been there. But where would he go? He was 68 years old. This was his house. He'd built the foundation with his father back in '82, spent 40 years making it a home. And now what? Start over in some apartment somewhere because his wife was carrying another man's child? Russell walked over to the workbench and picked up his father's hammer. The handle was smooth from decades of use, worn down by 2 generations of hands. He set it back in its exact spot, then he went inside to wait. Carol came home a little past 9, humming something under her breath. Russell heard her heels on the driveway before her key turned in the lock. She'd parked outside instead of pulling into the garage. That was new. Or maybe it wasn't new and he just hadn't been paying attention. "I'm home," she called out, bright as Christmas morning. Russell was sitting in his chair in the living room, still in his coat. The TV was on, but he wasn't watching it. Some game show. Wheel of Fortune, maybe. Carol appeared in his doorway, cheeks flushed from the cold, eyes shining. She was wearing the perfume he didn't recognize. The stuff that smelled younger somehow. Sweeter. "Russell, why didn't you come to the party? Everyone was asking about you." He looked at her, really looked. She was glowing. That's what people said about pregnant women, wasn't it? They glowed. "Roads were bad," he said. His voice came out steady. That surprised him. "Turn back." "Oh, honey." She came over, touched his arm. Her hand was warm. "You should have called. I would have come home with you." But would she have? Or would she have stayed there with Derek, laughing about the baby, making plans? "Didn't want to interrupt," Russell said. Carol kissed his cheek. Her lips felt like a lie. "You're sweet. I'm going to shower." It was so stuffy in there. She headed toward the bedroom, then paused. "Oh, the party was lovely, though. Really nice. You would have enjoyed it." Russell nodded, kept his eyes on the TV. After she left, he sat there for another 20 minutes. Heard the shower start, heard her singing something. Happy. She was happy. That night, Russell lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Carol slept beside him. She'd fallen asleep easy, one hand tucked under her pillow, breathing slow and regular, peaceful. He did the math again. And again. Every way he tried it, the numbers came up the same. Last intimate contact, late January. Current month, December. Her claim, 3 months pregnant, due in June. The heater kicked on with a click and a whoosh of warm air. Carol stirred but didn't wake. Russell's eyes stayed open. How long could a man pretend he didn't know his whole life was a lie? How long should he? Outside, the wind picked up. Ice tapped against the window like someone knocking, asking to be let in. Russell didn't have any answers yet, just questions that wouldn't let him sleep. For 3 days, Russell convinced himself he'd misheard. Maybe Carol had been talking about someone else's pregnancy. Maybe it was a joke he hadn't understood. Maybe stress was making him hear things that weren't there. On the second morning, Carol made pancakes. His favorite, blueberry with real maple syrup, not the corn syrup garbage from the store. She hummed while she cooked, spatula scraping the griddle, and when she set the plate in front of him, she kissed the top of his head. "You've been quiet," she said, sitting down across from him with her coffee. "Everything okay?" Russell cut into the stack. Steam rose up, carrying the smell of butter and sweetness. "Just tired." "We should do something fun," Carol said. She was wearing a new sweater, soft pink, younger than her usual colors. "Maybe take a trip this spring." "We never go anywhere anymore." Spring, when the baby would be due. "Maybe," Russell said. The pancakes tasted like sawdust in his mouth, but he ate them anyway, swallowed them down with coffee that had gone lukewarm. Carol reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I want us to reconnect, Russ. Really reconnect. Like we used to." When was that, exactly? When had they last been connected? Russell couldn't remember. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe he'd been so focused on his routine, his garage, his tools, his quiet evenings, that he'd missed when things started falling apart. Maybe if he tried harder now, if he paid more attention, things could go back to normal. Maybe he'd misunderstood everything. On the third day, she brought him lemonade in the garage. First time in months she'd come out there, she sat beside him on the workbench stool, close enough that her knee touched his, and talked about their future. About finishing the basement rec room they'd started 5 years ago and never completed. About planting a garden next summer. About growing old together. She touched his shoulder while she talked, her hand warm through his flannel shirt. And Russell wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to believe every word. Sunday morning arrived cold and bright. Carol was already dressed for church when Russell came out of the bathroom, her hair done up nice, wearing perfume that still didn't smell like the lavender she used to wear. "Ready?" she asked, smiling. Russell nodded, put on his tie, the blue one she'd given him 3 Christmases ago. They drove to First Lutheran in silence, the kind of quiet that could mean peace or could mean something else entirely. Russell didn't know which anymore. The parking lot was already half full. Chuck Reimer was getting out of his truck 2 spots over, saw them, lifted a hand in greeting. Russell waved back. Inside, the church smelled like old hymnals and the coffee they'd already brewed for the social hour after service. Mrs. Gunderson was standing near the coat rack, talking to Betty Walsh. She looked up when Russell and Carol walked in. Her eyes went straight to Carol's midsection, just a flick, quick as a bird, then up to Russell's face. And what Russell saw there made his stomach drop. Pity, pure, naked pity. Mrs. Gunderson knew, or suspected. And if she knew, the whole congregation probably knew. Small towns were like that. Arithmetic was simple when you knew how to count backward from a due date. "Russell, Carol," Mrs. Gunderson said, her voice careful, too careful. "Good to see you both." Carol smiled, squeezed Russell's arm. "Good to see you too, Margaret." They found their usual pew, third from the back on the right side. Russell sat down, Carol beside him. Around them, people whispered. Not about them necessarily, or maybe about them. Russell couldn't tell anymore. Pastor Henderson started the service with a prayer. Something about forgiveness and bearing each other's burdens. The words washed over Russell like water over stone, leaving no mark. During the sermon, something about the Good Samaritan. Russell felt eyes on the back of his neck. He didn't turn around, just stared at the cross hanging above the altar, at Jesus suffering up there, and wondered if God had a sense of humor about these things. At the coffee hour afterward, people were overly friendly to Carol, touching her arm, asking how she was feeling, making sure she got first pick of the cookies. Russell stood off to the side with his styrofoam cup of weak coffee watching. Chuck Reimer walked over. They'd known each other 40 years. Chuck ran the hardware store on Main, sold Russell half the tools in his garage. "How you doing, Russell?" Chuck asked. The question had weight to it. "Fine," Russell said. "You?" "Can't complain." Chuck sipped his coffee, looking out at the crowd. "Store's been busy. Everyone getting ready for the holidays." He paused. "Carol been feeling all right?" There it was. The careful question. The way Chuck wasn't quite looking at him when he asked it. "She's fine," Russell said. His voice came out flat. "Why?" "Oh, just asking. You know." Chuck cleared his throat. "Well, I better get back to Mary. You take care now." Russell watched him walk away. Watched Carol across the room, surrounded by women, laughing at something someone said. She looked radiant. That's what they'd say about her later, probably. Radiant. He set his coffee cup down on the table, and walked out to the parking lot. Sat in the truck with the heater running, waiting for Carol to finish her socializing. 20 minutes later, she climbed in, all smiles. "What a lovely service," she said. Russell put the truck in reverse. "Yeah." On the drive home, Carol chattered about who said what, who was wearing what, the new baby in the nursery. Russell made the appropriate sounds. Yeah, is that right? But he wasn't really listening. He was thinking about Mrs. Gunderson's face, about Chuck's careful question, about how everyone in that church knew something was wrong, and nobody had the guts to say it straight. Or maybe they were just being kind, letting him keep his dignity a little longer before everything fell apart. That evening, Carol brought it up over dinner. They were having meatloaf, his mother's recipe, the one Carol had learned when they first got married. "I was thinking," she said, cutting her meat into small, precise pieces, "we should look at our finances. Maybe talk to Travis down at the bank." Russell's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Why?" "Well," Carol smiled, "we have all that equity just sitting there. We could use it. Finally finish that basement rec room you always wanted. Maybe take that trip I mentioned." The rec room. She kept bringing up that damn rec room like it was something he'd been asking for. He'd mentioned it once, maybe 5 years ago, and then let it drop when Carol said it wasn't worth the money. "We don't need a loan," Russell said. "It's not a loan, honey. It's our money, our equity. We should use it." She reached across the table, put her hand over his. "It's about investing in our future. In us." Russell looked down at her hand on top of his. Her wedding ring caught the light. He'd saved up 6 months for that ring. Worked overtime surveying disputed property lines, came home with his knees aching and his back sore, all so he could buy her something nice. "I'll think about it," he said. Carol's smile got a little tighter. "Don't think too long. Opportunities don't wait forever." She got up, took her plate to the sink. Through the kitchen window, Russell could see Dolores Krantz's house next door. Her kitchen light was on. She was standing at her own window, looking out, looking at them. When Carol went upstairs to watch her shows, Russell stayed at the table. He sat there in the quiet, listening to the house settle around him, and felt the walls starting to close in. Friday came with more snow. Carol mentioned the bank appointment 3 times over breakfast, casual, like she was reminding him to pick up milk. 2 o'clock with Travis, she said, buttering her toast. "I already filled out most of the paperwork. We just need to sign." Russell looked up from his eggs. "You filled it out already?" "Well, someone had to get the ball rolling." She smiled. "I know how you are about paperwork. Figured I'd save you the trouble." How he was about paperwork. Russell had spent 40 years as a county assessor, documenting every property line, every survey marker, every disputed boundary in the county. He knew paperwork better than most lawyers. But he didn't say that, just nodded and finished his coffee. The bank smelled like new carpet and burnt coffee. Travis Hemmings was waiting for them in his office, young guy, maybe 29, wearing a tie that looked like his mother had picked it out. Russell had coached him in Little League back when Travis was 10. Remembered a skinny kid who could barely hit the ball, but who always showed up to practice early and stayed late. "Coach," Travis said, standing up. "Mrs. Webb, thanks for coming in." They shook hands. Travis's palm was sweating. They sat down across from his desk. The chairs were the kind that squeaked when you shifted weight. Carol crossed her legs, set her purse in her lap, looked comfortable as Sunday morning. Travis shuffled papers, cleared his throat, shuffled some more. "So," he said, "the home equity line of credit. You're looking at accessing around $180,000 based on current property value and existing mortgage balance." Carol leaned forward. "That's what we discussed. Russell and I want to finally finish some projects. The basement rec room, maybe a new kitchen." Travis nodded, pulled out a document, slid it across the desk toward Russell. His hand was shaking slightly. Russell picked up the papers. Standard refinance agreement, terms and conditions, interest rates. His eyes tracked down to the signature lines at the bottom. Carol's signature was already there, dated 3 days ago. As Russell read, Travis slid something else across the desk. A business card. It went under the document, hidden from Carol's view. Russell palmed it without looking down, kept reading the paperwork like nothing had happened. "I need to think about this," Russell said, setting the papers down. Carol's head turned toward him, fast. "We already discussed it, honey." "I know, but it's a big decision." Russell looked at Travis. "Can we have until Monday?" Travis nodded, maybe too quickly. "Sure, Coach. Take the weekend. No rush." "There's a little bit of a rush," Carol said. Her voice had an edge now. "These rates won't last forever." Monday's fine," Travis said. He stood up, extending his hand to Russell again. When they shook, Travis held on a second too long. His eyes said something his mouth couldn't. In the truck, Carol was quiet. The kind of quiet that filled up space and pressed down on your chest. "I don't understand why you're stalling," she said finally. They were stopped at a red light. Snow was starting to fall again, fat flakes that stuck to the windshield. "I'm not stalling. I'm being careful. We've been married 15 years, Russell. Don't you trust me?" The light turned green. Russell eased forward, watching the road. "It's not about trust," he said. But maybe it was. Maybe it had been for a while now, and he'd just been too stubborn to see it. Carol didn't say anything else the rest of the way home. When Russell pulled into the driveway, she got out without waiting, walked into the house, closed the door harder than necessary. Russell sat in the truck and pulled out the business card Travis had slipped him. On the back, in handwriting that looked like a doctor's, "Come back alone. T." Monday afternoon, Russell told Carol he had to run to the hardware store. She barely looked up from her phone. The bank was quiet. Travis saw him coming through the front door and stood up from his desk, gestured toward his office. Inside, Travis closed the door, pulled the blinds. "Thanks for coming back, Coach." He went to his filing cabinet, pulled out a folder. His hands weren't shaking now, just steady and sad. "What's going on, Travis?" Travis set the folder on the desk between them. "I could lose my job for showing you this." "Then why are you?" "Because you taught me to play fair." Travis opened the folder. "This isn't fair." The first document was a bank statement. Their joint savings account, balance, $30. Closed 3 weeks ago. Russell's chest went tight. That had $43,000 in it. "Had," Travis said quietly. He showed Russell another paper. "Transferred to an account in Carol's name only, November 28th. Russell stared at the numbers. November 28th. That was the day after Thanksgiving. He'd been at Eddie's place, watching football, eating leftovers. Carol had said she was going shopping. "There's more," Travis said. He pulled out the refinance application, the one Carol had filled out. "Look at the signature." Russell's signature was there at the bottom, but he'd never signed it. "That's not my signature," he said. "I know." Travis pointed to the date. "This was submitted December 2nd. You weren't even here. You had that surveying consult up in Green Bay, remember? I saw your truck was gone." Russell's hands started to shake. He set them flat on the desk to keep them still. "She forged preliminary documents," Travis said. "Nothing's finalized yet. That's why I wanted you here Friday, to sign in person. But Coach, she's been planning this, moving money, forging signatures. The refinance would have given her access to another $180,000. The office felt too small. Russell couldn't get enough air. "Why are you telling me this?" Travis sat back in his chair. "My dad walked out when I was 8. You stepped up, coached me, taught me how to throw, came to my games when nobody else did. You treated me like I mattered." He tapped the folder. "This matters. What she's doing to you, it's not right." Russell looked at the papers spread across the desk. His whole financial life, dismantled and rearranged while he'd been watching Wheel of Fortune. "What do I do?" "Get a lawyer," Travis said. "Today. She's stealing from you, Coach. And if she forges your signature on the final documents..." He shook his head. "That's felony fraud." Russell gathered up the papers. His hands were steadier now. Anger had a way of steadying things. "Can I take these?" "I made copies. They're yours." Travis leaned forward. "Be careful, Coach. People who steal usually don't stop until they're stopped." Russell drove past the insurance office on his way home. Carol's car was in the lot. So was a silver pickup truck he didn't recognize. But the license plate was familiar. He'd seen it before somewhere. In his own driveway, maybe. Late at night, when he'd been in the garage, he pulled into his own driveway and sat there with the engine running. Through the kitchen window, he could see Carol moving around. She was on the phone, laughing about something. Her free hand rested on her stomach, that unconscious gesture he'd seen her make a dozen times in the past week. The radio was playing "I'll Be Home for Christmas." The irony wasn't lost on him. Russell could go inside right now. Could confront her with the bank statements, the forged signatures, all of it. Could watch her face when she realized he knew. But what would that accomplish? She'd lie. Say it was a misunderstanding. Say Travis made a mistake. She'd cry maybe, touch his arm, ask him how he could doubt her. And then what? No-fault divorce in Wisconsin meant the adultery didn't matter legally. The money was probably already spent or hidden. He'd lose the house he'd built with his father, lose everything, and for what? The satisfaction of calling her a liar? Russell turned off the truck, sat there in the cab, watching his wife through the window. She looked happy, unburdened, like a woman who thought she was getting away with something. The snow kept falling. It was getting dark earlier these days, winter pressing in. Russell picked up his briefcase and got out of the truck. But he didn't walk toward the house. He walked toward the garage. Inside, surrounded by his father's tools and the smell of motor oil and old wood, Russell set the folder on his workbench. He stood there in the dim light, hands braced against the bench, and tried to figure out what a man did when his whole life turned into a lie he was supposed to keep living. The door to the house stayed closed, the garage stayed dark, and Russell stayed right where he was, alone, with the truth, and no idea what to do with it. New Year's came and went. Russell and Carol stayed home. She made prime rib. They watched the ball drop on TV. At midnight, she kissed his cheek and said, "To new beginnings." Russell nodded, didn't say anything. January settled in like a guest that wouldn't leave. The temperatures dropped into the teens, then single digits, the kind of cold that made your bones ache and your breath freeze in your lungs. Russell stopped going to church. First week, he said the truck wouldn't start. Second week, he said he wasn't feeling well. Third week, Carol stopped asking. She went alone. Came back talking about who said what, who brought what to the potluck, how everyone asked about him. Russell listened from his chair and made the appropriate sounds. Yeah, is that right? Eddie called twice, his old surveying partner, retired now like Russell. Left messages about getting coffee, maybe going ice fishing. Russell let them go to voicemail. Deleted them without listening all the way through. He knew what people were saying. Small towns didn't keep secrets long. Carol's pregnancy would be showing soon, and everyone could count. Everyone knew whose baby it wasn't. The garage became his refuge. Some nights he'd tell Carol he was organizing tools, then sit out there until 2 in the morning with just the space heater running and his thoughts for company. He ran out of furnace filters on a Wednesday. Couldn't put off the hardware store any longer. The heater was running constantly, and the old filter was clogged solid. Chuck's hardware smelled like sawdust and WD-40, same as it had for 40 years. Chuck was behind the counter, reading glasses perched on his nose, going through an invoice. Russell Webb. Chuck looked up, set down his pen. "Haven't seen you in a while." "Been busy." Russell grabbed a filter from the rack, brought it to the counter. Chuck rang it up slow, real slow, like he was thinking about something. "How's Carol doing these days?" He asked, not quite looking at Russell. "Fine. Why?" "Oh, just asking. You know." Chuck handed him his change. "She been feeling all right?" There it was again. That same careful question, the same tone Mrs. Gunderson had used, like everyone was tiptoeing around something they all knew, but nobody wanted to say. "She's fine," Russell said. The words came out harder than he meant them to. Chuck nodded. Looked like he wanted to say more. Didn't. Russell took his filter and left. In the parking lot, Old Man Henderson was loading bags of salt into his truck. He saw Russell, raised a hand, started to walk over. Russell got in his truck and drove away before Henderson could reach him. 2 in the morning, January 14th. Russell couldn't sleep, so he went to the garage. He'd been organizing his father's tools, all of them lined up by size and type, the way the old man had taught him. Hammers with hammers, screwdrivers with screwdrivers, everything in its place. He opened the bottom drawer of the old filing cabinet, hadn't looked in there in years. Inside were property documents, old tax records, papers he should have thrown out decades ago. At the bottom, in a manila folder gone soft with age, he found it. The original deed to the house, 1957. His father's signature at the bottom, strong and clear even after all these years. Frank Webb. The ink had faded to brown, but you could still read every letter. Russell pulled it out, held it up to the light. The paper felt thin, fragile, like it might crumble if he held it too tight. The property description was in his father's handwriting. Lot 7, Block 3, surveyed and certified. His father had surveyed this land himself, had worked 2 jobs for the down payment, drove truck during the day, did bookkeeping for the grain elevator, saved every penny for 3 years. Then he'd built the foundation with his own hands, poured the concrete, laid the blocks, made sure every corner was square and true. Russell read the description again, thought about his father's hands, calloused and strong, same as his own were now, thought about legacy, about what a man builds and what gets passed down. Carol's forged signature on those refinance papers wasn't just theft, it was erasure, trying to wipe out what his father had built, what Russell had maintained, like none of it mattered. The anger that hit him then was different from before, colder, steadier. He was still holding the deed when he saw the light come on next door, Dolores Krantz's kitchen. 2:30 in the morning, and her light was on. Through the gap in the garage door, Russell could see her silhouette at her window. She was looking toward his garage, looking right at him. Their eyes met across the dark space between houses. She picked up her phone, put it back down. Then she pulled on her coat. 2 minutes later, there was a knock on the garage door. Russell stood there, deed still in his hands, and stared at that door like it might bite. The knock came again, softer this time. "Russell?" Dolores' voice. "It's Dolores. I've got coffee and something you need to see." Long pause. Russell looked down at the deed, at his father's signature. at the life someone was trying to steal. He walked over and unlocked the door. Dolores Krantz was 72 years old and had been Russell's neighbor for going on 20 years. Her late husband, Harold, had been Russell's surveying partner until the cancer took him 5 years back. Russell remembered sitting with Harold on his last good days. Both of them on Harold's porch, not saying much, just being present while the world kept turning. Now Dolores stood in Russell's garage doorway, holding a thermos and a leather-bound ledger that looked older than both of them. "You going to let me in, or should I freeze out here?" she asked. Russell stepped aside. Dolores walked past him to the workbench, set down the thermos, looked around at the organized tools. Harold always said this was the finest workshop in the county. She unscrewed the thermos cap. "You got mugs out here?" Russell pulled 2 from the shelf above the bench, old camping mugs, dented and stained. Dolores poured coffee into both. The smell filled the garage. Strong, bitter, perfect. Then she pulled a flask from her coat pocket, added a solid pour of bourbon to each mug without asking if he wanted it. "Sit," she said. Russell sat on one of the workbench stools. Dolores took the other one. They were close enough that the cold wasn't quite so cold. For a full minute, neither of them spoke, just sipped the bourbon coffee and let the silence do what silence does, settle things down, make space for truth. Finally, Dolores set down her mug, put the ledger on the workbench between them. "I've been keeping track of something," she said. "Wasn't sure if I should show you. But then, I saw you out here at 2 in the morning crying over your daddy's deed. And I figured," she paused. "Well, I figured you needed to know you're not crazy, and you're not alone." She opened the ledger to the first page. September 17th, Carol's car left driveway 10:47 p.m., returned 1:15 a.m. September 23rd, silver pickup, license GHJ 4782, in driveway 11:20 p.m., left 2:40 a.m., Russell's truck gone. Overnight surveying job per conversation Tuesday. October 1st, Carol's car and silver pickup, both absent 9 p.m., 12:30 a.m. The entries went on, page after page. Dates, times, vehicle descriptions. Dolores's handwriting was precise, the penmanship of a woman who'd taught bookkeeping for 30 years. "My kitchen window faces your driveway," Dolores said quietly. "I'm a light sleeper. Have been since Harold got sick. Kept waking up to check on him. Never could break the habit after he passed." She turned another page. Started noticing things in September. Carol's patterns changed, coming and going at odd hours. October 15th. Carol closed living room curtains at 6 p.m., first time, usually leaves them open until bedtime. October 22nd. New perfume noticed at church, sweeter, younger scent. November 3rd. Silver pickup identified. Derek Munson, 1247 Oak Street, regional insurance supervisor, Carol's boss per church directory. Russell's hands were shaking. He set down his coffee before he spilled it. "You know who he is?" "Small town Russell. I looked him up." Dolores flipped forward. "That's not all." November 28th. Carol at bank 9 a.m. Thanksgiving day after, unusual. December 2nd. Carol at bank again 2 p.m. Russell out of town, Green Bay Consult. December 8th. Carol discussed refinance at church coffee hour with Betty Walsh. Said Russell and I are accessing our equity. "I didn't know about the refinance until I heard her talking," Dolores said. "But I knew something wasn't right. A woman doesn't change her perfume, start closing her curtains, and have her boss's truck in the driveway at midnight, unless she's hiding something." And Russell looked at the pages. 3 months of documentation. Every strange behavior, every unusual pattern, written down in Dolores's careful hand. "Why didn't you tell me?" Dolores met his eyes. "Would you have believed me, or would you have thought I was a nosy old woman making trouble?" Russell didn't have an answer for that. "I kept records because I knew when the truth came out, and it always does, you'd need proof. You'd need to know you weren't imagining things." She touched the ledger. "Harold always said you were the most honest man in the county. I kept these records because I knew you'd need truth more than sympathy." Russell's throat was tight. "I don't know what to do with this." "That depends." Dolores picked up her mug, took a long sip. "What do you want?" Russell thought about Carol's face when she talked about investing in their future, and thought about the forged signatures, the closed bank account, his father's deed. "I want my house," and he said, "I want her out. He stopped, swallowed. "I want people to know I wasn't the fool everyone thinks I am." "You're not a fool. You're a good man who trusted the wrong person." Dolores set down her mug. "But if you want justice, you need help. You need my nephew." "Your nephew?" "Martin Fell. He's a lawyer. Practices up in Madison. But he grew up here. Specializes in elder financial abuse cases." Russell bristled. "I'm not elderly." "You're 68. And your wife is stealing your house out from under you while carrying another man's baby. Dolores's voice was gentle but firm. That's exactly what this is, Russell. Financial abuse, fraud. And Martin doesn't lose these cases. The bourbon was warming Russell from the inside out. Or maybe it was the first spark of hope he'd felt in weeks. What would he do? Talk to you. Look at the evidence. Travis's documents, my ledger, figure out a legal strategy. She paused. Adultery doesn't matter much in a Wisconsin divorce, but forgery, hidden accounts, attempted theft of marital assets, those matter. Those have consequences. Russell looked at the ledger again. All those careful entries. All those nights Dolores had been watching, documenting, bearing witness when he'd thought he was completely alone. Why are you doing this for me? Dolores's face softened. When Harold was dying, you fixed our porch rail without being asked. Said you didn't want him tripping if he tried to go outside. You brought us soup. You sat with him when I needed to sleep. Her voice caught. You're a good man, Russell. Good men deserve better than this. They sat there in the quiet garage. Two old people drinking bourbon coffee at 3 a.m, and Russell felt something he hadn't felt since he'd heard Carol's voice through that conference room door. He felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a way through this that didn't end with him losing everything. Set up the meeting, he said. Dolores pulled out her phone. I'll call him first thing in the morning. She held up her mug. To truth. And to giving good people the weapons they need. Russell clinked his mug against hers. The sound echoed in the garage, a small, clear note in the darkness. Through the window, he could see Carol's bedroom light was still on. She was probably texting Derek, making plans, thinking she'd won. She didn't know about the ledger, didn't know about Dolores watching from her kitchen window, didn't know that the quiet man she'd underestimated was finally done being quiet. Russell looked down at his father's deed, still lying on the workbench where he'd set it. Some things couldn't be stolen. Some things stayed true, no matter who tried to erase them. He was about to find out what those things were. Martin Fell's office was in a brick building 2 towns over, far enough that nobody from home would see Russell's truck in the parking lot. Dolores rode with him. Neither of them said much on the drive. The office smelled like old law books and fresh coffee. The good kind, not the burnt stuff they served at the bank. Martin came around his desk to shake hands. He was 46, Dolores had said, but his handshake was firm and his eyes were sharp. Uncle Russell, he said, then corrected himself. Sorry, Coach Webb. Aunt Dolores has told me about you for years. They sat. Martin pulled out a legal pad, clicked his pen. Let's start with what we know, he said. Russell laid out Travis's documents, the closed savings account, the forged preliminary signatures. The refinance application Carol had filled out without him. Dolores added her ledger. 3 months of vehicle patterns, timeline documentation, Derek Munson's license plate number. Martin went through everything methodically, made notes, asked questions. His face stayed neutral the whole time. Professional calm that probably came from years of hearing stories like this. Finally, he sat back. Here's the situation, Martin said. Wisconsin is a no-fault divorce state. The affair doesn't matter legally. But financial fraud? Forgery? Attempted theft of marital assets? He tapped the documents. Those matter. Those have real consequences. What kind of consequences? Russell asked. If we can prove she forged your signature on final documents, not just the preliminary stuff, but the actual loan agreement, that's felony fraud, criminal charges. She'd be looking at prison time, probation at minimum, and she'd forfeit any claim to marital assets. Russell's chest tightened. I don't want her in prison. I just want my house. The threat of prison is what gets you the house, Martin said gently, and it prevents her from trying this again. He leaned forward. Here's what I recommend. We wait. Don't confront her. Sign nothing. When she gets desperate enough, and she will, because that pregnancy is going to start showing soon, she'll forge your signature on the final documents. You want me to let her commit a felony? I want her to prove intent, Martin said. The preliminary forgeries are concerning, but a good lawyer could argue clerical error, misunderstanding. But if she forges final loan documents after you've repeatedly delayed, that's premeditated fraud. That's a criminal case that gives us all the leverage we need. Dolores touched Russell's arm. It's a trap, Russell, and sometimes the only way to catch someone is to let them walk into it. Russell thought about living in that house for weeks, maybe months, pretending he didn't know, watching Carol make plans, touch her stomach, smile at him over breakfast. How long? 2 weeks, Martin said. Maybe 3. Her timeline's tight. She's what, 3.5 months now? She needs that money before the pregnancy becomes obvious. Before Russell could answer, there was a knock on the office door. Martin's secretary poked her head in. Mr. Fell, your 4 o'clock is here. I don't have a 4 o'clock, Martin started. The door opened wider. A woman stepped past the secretary. Slim, professional, short dark hair that framed a face Russell hadn't seen in 6 years. Miranda? Russell stood up so fast his chair scraped back. His daughter looked at him. Her eyes were the same as his, gray-blue, the kind that showed every emotion whether you wanted them to or not. Right now they showed guilt and determination in equal measure. "Hey, Dad," she said. "Dolores called me. Roads were shit, but I came anyway." They moved to Martin's conference room. Miranda sat across from Russell, not quite looking at him. 6 years of silence sat between them like a wall neither one knew how to climb. Dolores made the introductions, explained that Miranda was a CPA, worked in Minneapolis, had particular experience with financial investigations. "Show me what you've got," Miranda said. All business, like they were strangers, not father and daughter. Russell slid the documents across the table. Miranda went through them with the same methodical attention Martin had shown. Her jaw got tighter with each page. Finally, she looked up. "She's fucking you over," Miranda said. Russell winced at the language. "Sorry, but she is. This is systematic. Planned." She pulled out her laptop. "Who's the guy? The affair?" Russell's throat was dry. "Derek Munson, her boss." Miranda's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Let's see what the internet knows about Derek Munson." And 10 minutes later, she had his LinkedIn, Facebook, employment history, 2 complaints filed with the state insurance board. Court records showed a restraining order from 2019, dropped after settlement. Another complaint from 2021, harassment allegations settled internally. "He's got a pattern," Miranda said, turning the laptop so they could all see. 3 documented affairs with married subordinates in the last 8 years. All of them ended when things got complicated. He's a predator who targets vulnerable women. She pulled up photos. Derek at a CrossFit competition, Derek at a company retreat, Derek with his arm around a woman who wasn't Carol, timestamp from 2 years ago. "Dad," Miranda said, and her voice cracked slightly on the word. "This isn't about you. This is what he does. He finds married women, makes them feel special, uses them, and dumps them when it's convenient." Russell stared at the screen, at Derek's practiced smile, at the pattern laid out in dates and complaints and settlements. "Carol thinks she's special to him," Russell said quietly. "She's not," Miranda said. "She's just next." Then Martin pulled up the insurance company's employee handbook. "Workplace relationships with subordinates are explicitly prohibited. If we can document the affair, Derek faces termination. Maybe worse." "Good," Miranda said. Her voice was hard. "Let them both face consequences." Russell looked at his daughter, really looked at her. The last time they'd seen each other had been Thanksgiving 6 years ago. She'd accused Carol of being cold to him. He'd defended Carol. Words had escalated. Miranda had driven back to Minneapolis and they hadn't spoken since. Now she was here. Had driven through a blizzard because Dolores called. "Miranda," he started. "You didn't have to." "Yeah, I did." She closed her laptop, met his eyes finally. "I should have been here 6 years ago. I knew something was wrong with her. I said so and you didn't want to hear it, and I let my pride keep me away." Her voice was rough. "I'm here now, I'm staying, and we're going to make sure she doesn't take everything you've built." Russell couldn't speak, just nodded. Martin cleared his throat. "So here's the plan. Russell goes home, acts normal, signs nothing. We wait for Carol to make her move, and she will. Miranda, you keep digging into Derek's history. Find any and all documentation of his pattern. Dolores, keep watching, keep documenting. I'll prep the legal framework." "Oz, how long can you maintain the pretense?" Martin asked Russell. "Living with her, knowing everything, and staying quiet?" Russell looked at the 3 of them. Dolores, who'd been documenting in silence for months. Miranda, who'd driven through hell to be here. Martin, who believed good men deserved justice. "How long do we need? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Russell thought about his father building the foundation, 40 years of patient surveying work, the slow, methodical process of measuring truth. "Then I can do 3 weeks," he said. Miranda pulled her phone from her purse. "I'm taking remote work, staying at the Super 8 in town." You don't have to," Russell started. "I'm staying," Miranda said firmly. Then, softer, "Should have been here all along." Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them. Not forgiveness, that would take longer, but presence. The start of maybe someday finding their way back. Dolores raised her coffee cup. To patience, and to spring coming even after the longest winter. As they didn't toast, but they nodded. An alliance formed in a conference room on a February afternoon, built on 3 months of documentation and 6 years of regret and 40 years of a good man finally deciding he'd had enough. Russell drove home alone. In his rearview mirror, he could see Dolores's car heading back toward their street, Miranda's rental following at a distance. He wasn't alone anymore. Now he just had to go home and pretend he was The first week was the hardest. Russell went through the motions, made coffee in the morning, ate breakfast across from Carol, asked about her day, watched Wheel of Fortune in the evening while she scrolled through her phone, smiling at messages he couldn't see. At night, he lay beside her in the dark and counted ceiling tiles until sleep finally came. If it came. Carol was cheerful, brought him lemonade he didn't ask for, made his favorite meals, talked about spring plans like they had a future together. Valentine's Day, she made pot roast, lit candles, wore a dress he'd never seen before. Red, fitted at the waist but loose around her middle. Hiding what was there, she gave him a card. On the front, 2 people holding hands at sunset. Inside, her handwriting. To my husband, my partner, my future. Love always. See. Russell read it, swallowed the rage that tasted like copper. Thank you, he said. They ate by candlelight. Carol talked about the basement rec room again, about the new kitchen cabinets they could afford, about taking a trip maybe when the weather turned. Russell cut his pot roast into small pieces, nodded at the right moments. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Miranda probably, checking in like she did every night. You've been quiet lately, Carol said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. Just tired. We should finish that refinance soon, get the money moving so we can start planning. There it was. Wrapped in candlelight and pot roast, but there it was. Soon, Russell said. Carol's smile tightened at the edges. How soon? I'll call Travis next week. She withdrew her hand, took a sip of wine. You keep saying that. Big decision, want to be sure. We've been married 15 years, Russell. Her voice had an edge now, sharp as a surveyor's blade. Don't you trust me? Russell looked at her across the table, at the candlelight making shadows on her face, at the dress hiding her stomach, at the woman who'd forged his signature and emptied their savings and looked him in the eye every single day while lying. Of course I do, he said. Week 2, Carol mentioned the refinance 4 times. Week 3, it was twice a day. Travis called, she said over breakfast. Documents are ready, we just need to sign. Russell stirred his coffee. I'll stop by Thursday. I can go alone. Sign for both of us. Save you the trip. His hand stopped mid-stir. This was it. The moment Martin had predicted. Seems like we should both be there, Russell said carefully. For something this big, Carol's face went tight. Russell, we've been putting this off for weeks. Just want to be careful. We're careful. She stood up, carried her plate to the sink. You're stalling? I'm being thorough. She turned, leaned against the counter. Her hand went to her stomach, that unconscious gesture she made now when she was thinking. What's really going on? Russell kept his voice level. Nothing's going on. Thursday. I'll go Thursday. Thursday came. Russell called Travis from the garage. Something came up. Can we do Monday? Travis's voice was quiet. She's going to try something, Coach. I know. I'll be ready. Friday morning, Carol left the house dressed nice, said she was running errands. She came back 3 hours later, humming. Made spaghetti for dinner, was extra sweet all evening. Didn't mention the bank. Monday morning, Russell's phone rang at 9:47 a.m. Travis. Coach. His voice was tight. She was just here. Signed the final documents. Both signatures. Russell's hand clenched around the phone. I didn't sign anything. I know. I flagged it immediately. You need to call your lawyer. Now. Russell hung up, called Martin. We've got her, Martin said. I'm contacting the sheriff's office. Don't confront her yet. Act normal. There's legal procedure to follow. 3 days of waiting. 3 days of eating dinner across from Carol while she talked about spring gardens and basement renovations and a future that was never going to happen. Wednesday evening, Martin called. Law office meeting? Friday, 10 a.m. Carol, her lawyer, Derek. Sheriff's deputy will be present with a warrant. A warrant. For her arrest, forgery, attempted fraud. It's happening, Russell. That night, Russell and Carol had their last dinner together. She'd made chicken parmesan, talked about planting tomatoes in May, about finally finishing that basement. Russell nodded, said the right things, watched her smile and plan and lie. Friday morning, he put on his suit, the blue one, the good one, first time in months. Carol looked up from her coffee. Where are you going? Meeting. What meeting? Just a meeting. He picked up his truck keys. I'll be back later. He walked out before she could ask anything else. In the rearview mirror, he saw her standing in the doorway, watching him drive away, her hand on her stomach, confusion on her face. She'd know soon enough. Martin's office waiting room smelled like leather chairs and old carpet. Russell sat with his hands on his knees, breathing steady. Miranda was beside him, laptop bag over her shoulder. Dolores had stayed home. Didn't need to be here for this part, she'd said. Just wanted to be there after. Deputy Warren was in Martin's office. Russell had seen him come in 20 minutes ago. Uniform pressed, handcuffs on his belt, face neutral as stone. "You okay?" Miranda asked. Russell nodded. Didn't trust his voice yet. At 9:58, the front door opened. Carol walked in with a woman in a gray pantsuit, her lawyer, Sharon Chen. Russell knew Sharon from church. She'd done wills for half the congregation. Carol saw Russell and froze. Her hand went to her purse strap, knuckles white. "Russell, what are you doing here?" "Same meeting, I expect." Carol turned to Sharon, whispered something. Sharon's face stayed professional, but her eyes went to the closed office door where Deputy Warren was waiting. At 10:03, Derek Munson walked in. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Russell's truck. Hair gelled, tie perfect, shoes shined. But his eyes were wrong, darting, nervous. He saw Carol and didn't go to her. Sat 3 chairs away, pulled out his phone. Carol stared at him. "Derek?" He looked up. Carol. That was it, just her name. No explanation for why he was sitting across the room instead of beside her. Martin came out of his office. "Thank you all for coming. If you'll follow me to the conference room." They filed in. Big table. Windows overlooking the street. Russell sat next to Miranda. Carol and Sharon across from them. Derek at the far end, as far from Carol as he could get while still being in the same room. Martin closed the door, laid out a folder on the table. "Before we begin divorce mediation," he said, "there's a legal matter that needs to be addressed." He nodded toward the side door. Deputy Warren walked in, hand resting on his belt near the handcuffs. Carol's face went white. "Carol Webb," Deputy Warren said, his voice formal. "I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of forgery and attempted financial fraud." "Oh, what?" Carol's voice cracked. "This is insane. Russell, what is this?" Martin opened the folder, slid documents across the table. Bank records showing the closure of a joint savings account without Mr. Webb's knowledge or consent. Transfer of $43,000 to an account in your name only. Preliminary refinance documents bearing Mr. Webb's forged signature, submitted while he was out of town. He laid out more papers. And final loan documents, signed this past Friday. Documents Mr. Webb never saw, never signed, but which bear his signature nonetheless. Sharon Chen was reading fast, her professional calm cracking. "Carol, did you sign Russell's name to these?" Carol's hands were shaking. We discussed the refinance. He kept stalling. I was just trying to move things forward." "By forging his signature?" Sharon's voice was sharp. "That's not moving things forward. That's fraud. We're married. It's community property." "Forgery is forgery," Martin said quietly. "Marital status doesn't give you the right to commit felony fraud." Carol turned to Russell. Her eyes were wet, desperate. "You knew? This whole time you've been—" She stopped. Understanding crashed over her face. "You let me do it. You let me sign those papers knowing—" "I let you make your choice," Russell said. His voice was steady, emptier than he'd expected. "Same as you've been letting me make mine without all the information." Carol stood up fast, chair scraping back. Turned to Derek. Tell them we're together. Tell them about the baby." Derek didn't look up from his phone. "Derek?" Her voice broke. "Tell them." When Derek's lawyer, a man Russell hadn't even noticed come in, cleared his throat. "My client is here under subpoena. He has no comment on Mrs. Webb's personal decisions." Personal decisions?" Carol's voice was rising. "You said you love me. You said we'd be together. You said—" Derek finally looked at her. His face was carefully blank. "I think you misunderstood our relationship, Carol." The room went silent. Carol stared at him. "Misunderstood?" "We were friends, co-workers, nothing more." Derek stood up, buttoned his suit jacket. "I never promised you anything." "You're lying." Carol's voice was shaking. "The baby—" "I have text messages," Derek said, pulling out his phone. "Showing you initiated every interaction. Showing you pursuing me, despite my attempts to maintain professional boundaries." He looked at his lawyer. "Can I go?" "The subpoena only required your presence," the lawyer said. "You're free to leave." Derek walked toward the door. "You coward," Miranda said. Quiet, but everyone heard it. "You're a coward." Derek paused at the door. For a second, something flickered across his face. Shame, maybe. Or just irritation at being called out. Then he left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Carol stood there, staring at the empty doorway. Her hand went to her stomach. The baby that was supposed to change everything. The future she'd destroyed her marriage for. "He's done this before," Miranda said. She pulled up her laptop, turned it so Carol could see. 3 other women, all married, all subordinates, all discarded when things got complicated. She showed the screen to Sharon. "He's a predator with a pattern, and your client was just the latest." Carol sat down slowly. All the color had drained from her face. Deputy Warren pulled out handcuffs. "Mrs. Webb, you need to come with me." Sharon put a hand on Carol's arm. Don't say anything else. We'll talk at the station. Carol looked at Russell, really looked at him. Please, she whispered. I'm pregnant. You can't. Russell stood up, felt Miranda's hand on his arm, steadying him. That baby isn't mine, he said. The words came out quiet, final. That house is. There's a difference. Deputy Warren was reading Carol her rights. Words Russell had heard on TV, but never thought he'd hear directed at his wife. Carol was crying now, Sharon guiding her toward the door. At the threshold, Carol turned back. Russell, but he'd already looked away. The hallway outside the conference room was quiet. Russell leaned against the wall, breathing hard. His hands were shaking. Miranda stood beside him, didn't say anything, just there. Dolores appeared from the waiting room with a paper cup of coffee. Must have come in while they were inside. She handed it to Russell without a word. He took it. The coffee was terrible, weak and lukewarm, but he drank it anyway. Martin came out. Formal charges have been filed. She'll be arraigned Monday. Sharon will likely negotiate a plea deal. The evidence is overwhelming. What happens now? Russell asked. Divorce proceeds. Given the criminal fraud charges, you'll retain the house, majority of assets. She may owe restitution. Martin paused. You did the right thing, Russell. Russell didn't feel like he'd done the right thing. Didn't feel like he'd done the wrong thing either. Just felt hollowed out, empty. You okay, Dad? Miranda's voice was soft. I don't know yet, Russell said honestly. Dolores touched his shoulder. Because you're not cruel. You're just done being kind to people who don't deserve it. Through the window, Russell could see snow starting to fall. March snow, the wet kind that melted on contact. Winter wasn't quite done, but you could feel it losing its grip. Come on, Miranda said. Let's get you home. They walked out together. Russell, Miranda, Dolores. 3 people who'd been strangers, or distant, or watching from windows, now walking side by side. In the parking lot, Russell stopped, looked back at the building where his wife was being processed, where the life he'd known for 15 years had officially ended. You did good, Coach, Dolores said. Russell didn't answer, just got in his truck and drove home, Miranda's rental following at a distance. The house was empty when he got there. Carol's car was still at the law office. Inside, everything was exactly as they'd left it that morning. Coffee cups in the sink, her magazine on the counter, the Valentine's card still on the mantel. Russell walked through the rooms like a stranger. This was his house, his father's house. But it didn't feel like home anymore. It just felt like a place where he'd survived something. Miranda knocked on his door an hour later. Thought you might want company. He let her in. They sat in the kitchen, drinking fresh coffee Miranda had made, not talking much, just being present while the world kept turning. Outside, the March snow was falling harder now, but underneath it, you could smell earth, spring, stubborn and patient, pushing through. 3 months later, Russell sat on his porch with coffee and watched spring happen. It was early June. The kind of morning where the air smelled like wet earth and new grass. Warm enough that he didn't need a jacket, but cool enough that the coffee stayed hot. Carol had pleaded guilty to felony fraud. 2 years probation, $50,000 in restitution, community service. She was living with her sister 2 towns over. The baby was due any day now. Russell hadn't seen her since the law office. Derek had been terminated from the insurance company. The HR investigation had turned up enough that they'd let him go quietly, no scandal, just a resignation that wasn't really a resignation. Word was, he'd moved to Illinois. Russell didn't care enough to find out if that was true. The divorce was finalized in April. Russell kept the house, 70% of the assets. His lawyer had been efficient, cold as the winter that had finally ended. He sipped his coffee. It was the same coffee he'd been drinking for 40 years, but it tasted different now. Or maybe he tasted different, hard to say. Dolores came out onto her porch next door. She had her own coffee, waved at him with her free hand. Morning, Russell. Morning. They sat like that most mornings now, not talking much. Just 2 old people drinking coffee and watching the world wake up. The for sale sign had gone up in Russell's yard 2 weeks ago. 3 showings already. A young couple was coming back for a second look on Tuesday. You sure about selling? Dolores had asked when the sign went up. Too many ghosts, Russell had said. Time for something new. He'd found a small condo 30 minutes from Minneapolis. 2 bedrooms, maintenance included, closer to Miranda. She'd helped him look at places, made spreadsheets comparing cost. That was how she showed love, through spreadsheets and practical planning, but she was coming around more, every other weekend now. Slow rebuilding of what 6 years of silence had broken. They didn't talk about the fight yet, maybe someday, or maybe just moving forward was enough. Saturday morning, Miranda's car pulled into the driveway. Russell watched from the kitchen window as she got out, then reached back in for something. A boy climbed out of the back seat, 8 years old, dark hair, skinny as a rail. Russell's grandson, Tyler. They'd met twice before, awkward visits where the boy had stayed close to his mother and Russell hadn't known what to say. Miranda came to the door. Hope it's okay I brought him. More than okay. Tyler was shy, standing half behind Miranda. Russell remembered being that age. Remembered his own father, big and quiet, always working. You hungry? Russell asked the boy. I've got pancakes. Tyler nodded. They ate breakfast. Russell's blueberry pancakes. The ones Carol used to make, but different somehow. Better, maybe. Or just his. After, Tyler wandered into the garage. Russell heard him moving around out there, curiosity getting the better of shyness. When Russell followed, he found the boy standing at the workbench, looking at the surveyor's transit sitting there. What's this, Grandpa? Grandpa. First time he'd said it without prompting. That's a surveyor's transit, Russell said, for measuring land, finding property lines. What's it do? Come on, I'll show you. In the backyard, Russell set up the transit on its tripod. Tyler watched, asking questions. Why's it got 3 legs? What's that glass thing? How do you know if it's working? Russell answered each one. Explained about finding fixed reference points. About how surveying was about truth, measuring what's really there, not what people wished was there. You look through here, Russell said, adjusting the eyepiece. Find something that doesn't move. Something you can trust to stay true. Tyler peered through. What if you can't find any? Russell thought about Dolores's kitchen window. About Travis's handwritten note. About Miranda driving through a blizzard because someone called. You keep looking until you do, he said. And sometimes other people help you see what's always been there. Tyler looked through the transit again. His small hands gripped the sides carefully, the way kids do when they're holding something important. I see it, Grandpa. I see the point. Russell put his hand on the boy's shoulder, felt the warmth there, the future, standing solid under his palm. From the porch, Miranda was taking pictures on her phone. 3 generations, the transit, June light, this moment, this was what survived. Not the house, not the marriage, not the 40 years of routine that had turned to dust. This, teaching, connection. Truth passed down from rough hands to smooth ones. You're good at this, Russell said. Tyler beamed up at him. Can we do it again sometime? Yeah, Russell said. We can do it again. That evening, after Miranda and Tyler had driven back to Minneapolis, Russell sat alone on his porch. The sun was going down, painting the sky orange and pink, the kind of sunset his father used to call a gift from the good Lord for folks smart enough to sit still and watch. Russell held his father's deed one last time before packing it for the move. The paper was thin, fragile as old skin. He ran his thumb over the signature, Frank Webb, 1957. Penmanship from another era, when a man's word and a man's signature meant the same thing. He thought about what he'd lost. 15 years of marriage, the illusion of companionship, money that was probably gone forever, time he couldn't get back. But he thought about what he'd kept too. The house his father built, his dignity, the truth, measured carefully and held steady when everything else was shifting. Some things couldn't be stolen, some things stayed true. Inside, the house smelled like the spaghetti Miranda had made before leaving. She was staying over next weekend, helping him pack. Said Tyler wanted to learn more about surveying. Russell folded the deed carefully, placed it in a box marked Keep in his own careful handwriting. Through the window, he could see Dolores's porch light come on. She'd be there tomorrow morning with coffee. And the morning after that, some friendships were built slow, like foundations. Those were the ones that held. The screen door creaked when Russell went inside. That sound, wood on wood, spring tension, home, would be gone soon. The young couple would oil the hinges, probably, fix what Russell had learned to live with. But the surveyor's transit was packed carefully in the truck already. That was coming with him. That, and the knowledge of how to find fixed points when everything else was moving. Russell turned off the porch light, left it dark for the first time in months. Tomorrow, he'd turn it back on. But tonight, he let the darkness be what it was. Just darkness. Not loneliness, not fear, just the quiet space between one life and the next. Outside, spring kept happening. Ice had melted weeks ago. The ground had thawed. Seeds his father had planted 40 years ago were still growing. Oak trees in the yard. Roots deeper than memory. You didn't always get to choose what got taken from you. But you always got to choose what you refused to let them steal. Russell had chosen, and he was still standing. That was enough.